so wrong about BMWs in my last video.
N54 is where most people have the most fun. That's a straight 6 twin-scroll turbo engine.
I want to apologize to the internet, you strangers out there in the world that look at me awkwardly from 35 feet away at a car show only to say when I walk up to you, I know you from somewhere. It's not any sort of cool interaction. It's usually just an awkward stare as you try to figure out the Wish app experience that you have with my big old forehead. But in the last BMW video, I made a couple mistakes. God forbid, that's impossible. Get your facts straight. Double check them. ChatGPT them, Alex. What are you doing? Rookie numbers, rookie mistakes. I do want to apologize. I always love when the audience/internet corrects me on things because I'm going to be honest. I do talk about cars quite a bit. And every once in a while, I do get things wrong. So if you're over there and you're an avid BMW enthusiast and you got mad at the fact that I said an N54 was a closed deck engine, or I made the mistake between a twin scroll turbocharged application versus a twin turbocharged application, I do want to apologize. But guess what, ladies and gentlemen, we're back, me and you, for 20 minutes, which is approximately the amount of time it actually takes most people to finish their meal at a corporate office environment, but they kept it to 30 minutes because they want you to feel like you still have a sense of culture as you have your lunch in the HGTV basement of your local credit union. Today, we're talking about the Mk4 Supra. We're talking about the Mk4 Supra because, in my opinion, humbly, it is the greatest car ever conceived by Toyota practically ever. There is so much going for the Toyota Supra that it is like the definition of, if you could do things right, this is how you'd build a car. And surprisingly enough, as we go through the history and some really unimportant information about the Supra, it didn't do well. Like, it did not do that great. Here in the United States, the Toyota Supra was a confuzzled mess. It was a high-performance Toyota that beat Ferrari, it beat Porsche, it beat everyone at its own game. But it also beat itself because people couldn't figure out just what the hell it was. It didn't actually look that much like a predecessor of the Supra, and they claimed that it looked like the 2000 GT, except the 2000 GT never really came into the United States because Carroll Shelby raced them against Pete Brock and lost to Datsuns. So instead, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to tell you 20 minutes of useless information along with a couple stories here or there. I'm Alex Martini with 2 underscores on Instagram. And if you're looking for car parts, mod your car with your friends at martiniworks.com. There's a lot of new information going out with cars, car parts, tariffs, things like that. And our goal is to keep people up to date and knowledgeable on what's going on so that you can mod your car the right way and that you're not wasting your money. And so if you have any questions on anything that's happening out in the world, let us know in the comments below, or just shoot us a message over at martiniworks.com. We'd absolutely love for you to build your car there. It allows us to continue making videos like this. Let's start off with some easy stuff. What does the name Supra mean? It's actually a Latin prefix for above, or to surpass, or to go beyond. The Supra trim was actually very successful. We know when we talk about Mk4, don't call it an Mk4. You do get shunned for saying that, but the Mk4 Supra was kind of like the ultimate response to Nissan and the RB success that it was having in racing and what it was having in JGTC and what it was doing pretty much across the world, everywhere except the United States pretty much. But really what happened with the Supra nameplate is it used to be part of the Celica nameplate. It used to be Toyota Celica Supra. And the Celica Supra was just a 6-cylinder Celica. My mom actually owned one, fun fact. And they thought she was the cat's ass. Now, nobody really knew that it also didn't have floor pans. And my mom had to keep her feet up from the carpet because if she pushed on the carpet too hard, her feet would go below the actual floor plan, you'd hit the ground. Anyway, kind of a shit box, but it was a cool shit box, and it was a sports car. So what makes the Mk4 Supra good? There's going to be some information in here where if you're an expert on the Supra platform, you're going to be like, I already knew that. But my goal here is to give you a couple bits of information that you may not know. Why did I say bits like that? Watch one episode of Severance, and now I'm talking like this. Anyway, why is it good? It's overbuilt. I think one of the big things a lot of people have a tendency to forget is that in the 90s, everybody that was manufacturing pretty much anything in Japan had more money than sense. The economic layout globally had just given Japan so much capital, so much money. They were so ahead of the curve that a lot of these companies were doing so many innovative things because they had the capital to do so. And I would say there was no companies that were doing it quite as good as the electronic companies of the 90s, but there was a couple vehicle manufacturers that were doing pretty well too. Nissan and Toyota likely being two of the biggest and best. Honda was actually slugging a little bit behind. The thing is that they were so successful globally that a lot of the Japanese success that they had back in the 90s, you don't really hear that much about. Now, with that said, the engine is a 2JZ GTE. That's an engine people get they get tattooed on them. Like, they talk about worshiping this engine, and they probably should. It's an inline layout. It's a 6-cylinder. It's got dual overhead cam. It's got an air intercooled twin turbocharged thick ass. I wrote that in my notes. Thick ass. Cast iron block with aluminum cylinder heads and a closed deck design. I'm not wrong about it this time, okay? It's closed, not semi-closed, not open, it's closed, fully closed, okay? Like most restaurants up here in Wisconsin nowadays, post 2020, because they realized they didn't make any money on Mondays, it's a closed deck design. Now, the inline 6 makes it very well balanced. That's why actually BMW has done that for a very long time. It's a very balanced motor. Unfortunately, it kind of sounds poopy. BMWs sometimes do. But inline 6s were actually pretty successful in racing even back in the day, and that's where Toyota will say it got its heritage from the 2000 GT because it was also an inline 6. Now, what makes it so darn good? Outside of the fact that the actual block itself is incredibly reinforced. Like, it is a beefy engine. It also has some little bits and pieces that pretty much got it ready to rock and roll for motorsport. It had a forged crank. It had a head that flowed incredibly well. The biggest thing that Toyota put a lot of emphasis on, though, above anything else, was the oil and the cooling of the engine. If you guys remember, RBs are incredibly potent engines. But if you talk to anybody who has ever cracked open an RB, they will tell you that it is the most diabolical, terrible, ununiformic, disgusting, disheartening experience of their entire life. You wanna know why? Because RBs should never be cracked open. Unless you know what the hell you're doing, those things need to stay sealed, stamped, kissed by a Nissan engineer, no matter how old it is. I am never opening the top half of our RB25 because once you do that, the tolerance of it all seems to just kind of go astray. It's like opening up that one drawer you have in the kitchen that's just got a bunch of no matter what you do, you cannot close that drawer perfectly because a cord popped out or because a scissors got stuck or because a knife is in the corner. That is RBs, and they're incredible engines as long as you are an actual professional. The 2JZ GTE is that without any of the problems. It's an incredibly stout and strong motor. It is nigh bulletproof unless you really do try to blow it up. And a lot of that has to do with the oil and cooling and the amount of over-engineering Toyota did with this engine to keep it reliable. I think one of the biggest and most well-known facts is this thing about bearing caps. They'll tell you that a normal 4-cylinder might have 2 or 3. A 6-cylinder high performance might have 4 or 5. The 2JZ has 7 bearing caps to ensure that you don't have to deal with any sort of issue even as you rise in power. It has a non-interference engine, which means the pistons and the valves never interfere in the same area, which prevents any sort of timing issue. A lot of the things that Toyota did with the 2JZ, it was almost as if you gave the smartest person you possibly could a little bit of cocaine, but the person that you gave it to was still a very responsible adult. And that is what the 2JZ is. It is this coked up, high tense pressured thing that still did his taxes. Like, I don't know how to explain it. It's probably one of the best engines you can get. It's still one of the strongest used engines that you can get. And I would argue that this and the LS right up next to each other. RB obviously very, very good, not saying that it's bad at all, but the RB is not like the 2JZ. And I would argue that the 2JZ is more like an LS in terms of its modularity, its reliability, its consistency to performance. if you blow them up, how to put them back together. You can't go wrong with it. So I know I sound a little bit like on the 2J, all right? But you're spending $80,000 in 2025, so you should love this thing because it is really goddamn old. I think we're coming up on 30 years now for us to love the Toyota Supra. So most people will think, I don't want to spend $80,000. I will buy a non-turbo Supra for $30,000. Should I buy one? I don't know. Yes? Here's the small problem with that, and we'll get into this just a little bit in my notes here, but you'll kind of get made fun of. And the reason that I say that is if you love the Toyota Supra for how it looks, you probably don't need to get the one that's turbocharged. You also probably don't even need to get the one that's manual. Both of those things add on cost. Also, if it was made for the US versus if it was imported from Japan is also going to change the cost of the car. The problem with that is, and I am going to sound very controversial, so you're gonna need to stay with me for the whole video. I don't know if the Toyota Supra, the Mark IV, is actually a pretty car. I'm not convinced entirely that the Mark IV Toyota Supra is pretty, period. I don't think it is. I think the Toyota Supra is an absolute missile of a car that Toyota had built to make almost the perfect street race car you could possibly get. But I don't think it's inherently a good looking car from the get-go. It's very bubbly, it's very wide, it's very open, it's got confusing contoured lines on the side. If I hear one more person make a Fast and Furious reference with the Mark IV Supra, I just don't know what I'm gonna do with my hands, except close them up and punch in their general area. That's really cringe. I'm gonna sell you this though. You can get one. And if you like them, you like them. Buy one. They're pretty, like the colors they come in I think are cool. Get rid of the wheels, do something different there. It's fantastic. But the Supra's known for what's underneath the hood. Like that's the big thing. And the transmission that was in that 6-speed, was game changing. And so I would say you can, but the non-turbo automatic and the turbo manual, in my opinion, is very similar to somebody saying that the GTR is more of a unique car of itself than a GTT is to a GTR. You remember when we talked about that? I do feel that way about what the Supra is supposed to be versus what the non-turbo version is. Now, like I said before, the original, it didn't do super well. The later years of the Supra, particularly, I think the Mark IV ended in '98 here in the United States. It just was not selling. It was so expensive for a Toyota that it just wasn't doing well. Now, to be fair, it was doing incredibly well performance-wise, but from an actual normal marketplace, a lot of people were getting very conscious about what cars they were buying and what they wanted to support, and fuel efficiency was a big deal, blah, 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 blah. But like I said before, and I can already feel the comments, I can feel the internet warming up, like just getting heated about this, but you can't put a Mark IV Supra next to an R34 GTR or an R33 GTR or an RX-7, an FDRX-7, and say that they all look like they're in their finished state. Like the Supra, I just feel like needed 2 more minutes in the popcorn bag to like fully cook, whereas the RX-7 looks perfect, start to finish, no issues at all. The R33 GTR, in my opinion, perfect. I put it above the Mark IV Supra, but that's besides the point. What does a closed end deck mean? I actually saw this in a comment in the previous video, and I'm gonna do my best to explain it, but I am not an engineer or a engine builder. I blow them up. Very hard for me to put them back together. An open deck is an easy to manufacture like block. And essentially, simply put, when we talk about open deck versus semi-closed deck versus closed deck, usually what we're talking about here is when you look at an actual block, there's little areas around the cylinder walls, and that can either be used for cooling, water jackets, allows coolant to kind of keep everything, moving and flowing. And I want to say this as plainly as I can without getting into too many details. However, the more holes you have around something that has combustion and pressure, the more vulnerable you make it when it's all the way at the top, when the pressure is at its highest. And so what will happen in time is when you have a high performance vehicle and you start modifying them or you start throwing more power at them, that pressure, that heat, that consistency, it gets more and more and more. And open decks that have that evacuated area around the cylinder walls that can help with keeping things cool can ultimately be the reason that engines fail, because they can't withstand the amount of pressure or heat or use of what you're trying to do with the block. If there's professionals out there, you want to add additional commentary, please do so below. We're a community, we're here to help. I just wanted to get that out there. So then they introduced a semi-closed deck. That's found on things like an EJ25, on like the STI. It's pretty common on modern factory turbocharged aluminum blocks. There's more support. Typically, there's like 2 points that actually support directly to that cylinder wall. They are more expensive, and it requires a level of adherence that's a little bit tougher, which means it's more expensive, it's slower. Open deck, faster, cooler. And then you have a closed deck. That's usually where there's typically only coolant ports, but you get full support at the top of the cylinder walls, and a lot of times it's the beefiest version that you can get. Now, if you go and type in new vehicles, you're gonna find that some have closed decks still. Most will have a semi-closed deck just for cost adherence. Now, they're more expensive, more reliable, 2JZ, closed deck. Good, great, awesome. Do they have 276 horsepower? They do not. They've got more. It was called the Gentleman's Agreement, if you remember. If you recall, the Gentleman's Agreement was not the Gentleman's Agreement from 1906 to 1908. Don't Google that. That's a different thing. You got to type in cars after that. It was an agreement with Japan and the manufacturer to limit the horsepower stated with cars. This is a huge little balloon of facts and history here that I want to believe some of it. I don't believe all of it. I've done so much history on the Gentleman's Agreement. What they thought was happening was that there was a linking between horsepower stated by vehicle manufacturer and public accidents and speeding. And so the Japanese government essentially came in to volunteer, very similar to the Nissan and Honda merger, that something needed to be done. And so nothing was ever really signed on paper, but Honda, Nissan, Mazda, Mitsubishi all had agreed that all of their performance sports cars would be stated that it could not exceed 276 horsepower. So they did it. And it lasted all the way up until a Honda V6, 3.5 liter, I think it was an Accord actually, had 300 horsepower. Now, that didn't actually solve anything. Fun fact, there is no actual correlation between stated horsepower given on sports cars and the causality of accidents that were happening on Japanese roads. There was nothing there. But it just became this thing for a very, very long time. But you take that car, you throw it on a dyno, something like a R34 GTR would actually have 320 base horsepower. Same thing with the Supra, 322 base horsepower. So then people would say, you know, is it a competitor to the RB? Is that true? Yes. I don't know if the Supra was made in a direct retaliation to the RB. I do think that the Toyota Supra needed to be revised because the rest of the manufacturers were gunning for gold. The Supra did super well. Won its class at the Swiss Mountain Races, raced in Le Mans, raced Pikes Peak, raced SCCA Racing. JGTC is where you saw some of the iconic racing of the Mk4 Supra. You saw Tom's Castrol, which didn't have the 2JZ in it like what we think. And it was very competitive. It was very, very competitive. And it was very, very fast. Now, Toyota wasn't just aiming to compete with RBs and with Mazda RX-7s. When the 4th gen Supra was actually engineered and tested, particularly at the Nürburgring, it was using cars like old BMW M5s and Porsche turbos as its benchmark, which I thought was really interesting. This was when Toyota was starting to bark up European platforms of like speed and stability and reliability. Well, not reliability. Nothing from Europe back then was very reliable outside of BMWs and Porsches, but a lot of that had to do with a man named Isao Suzuki. He was the chief engineer for the previous gen Toyota MR2s. He was also a spokesperson for the Mk4 Supra. He spent a lot of time at the Nürburgring, and what we got was a car that with a blank check managed to beat the power to weight ratio of a Ferrari 348. And they had no problem bragging about that. It was also had a lot of things to do with how the entirety of the car was designed. The transmission being a Geartrag 6-speed. This paired with the 2JZ, paired with the differential, paired with the how they actually kind of developed the simplicity of the car. Even though it was based on some of the SOAR information, it was shorter, it was snubbier, it was harsher. This was actually a fun fact for you too. They say that Team Suzuki's weight reduction plan, as they were working through the car to make it feel lighter than it actually was, because it is still a heavier car, but it is light-ish. They ended up cutting out almost 300 pounds when they compared to their previous generation that they started with. And it was stated that there was over 950 meetings over 2 years of development to shave that 300 pounds off the Mark IV Supra. And they hollowed out anything and everything they possibly could on this. That's what makes the Mark IV Supra so special, is that this came at a heyday when it seemed like money wasn't a concern for engineering a car that had a Toyota badge on it. It was reliable, it was easy, it was good, it was fast. It was everything you could want in a car, outside of the fact that it could have had 2 more doors. And they do say, like, if equal parts everything, it had the reliability to brag about it. It was just a little bit pricey to have a Toyota badge, but it beat the 348. It beat the Porsche 911 Turbo. It beat the Aston Martin DB7. The only thing it really lost to was emissions. A lot of people will think that the Mark IV Supra is overhyped. I don't know. I don't know if it is or not. I don't think it is. I think it's a great car. It is an old car though. It is something where if you're really looking to understand if this is something you want, you're probably just better off getting a Mark V Supra. Are they the same? No, but the B58 in the new Supra is a pretty potent engine and it does a lot and it's fun to drive and it's a blast. I think the Mark IV Supra is a collector's car now and has become a collector's car, and it's expensive, and it's a lot of times if you're buying one, you're gonna be fetching 6 figures if you want a stock one, and the 5-figure ones have had a ton of hands inside the engine bay. Now, what to watch out for? Toyota Supras are like $80,000 now. You get an RZ that has basic turbo equipment. There's the RZS. Also, later years got the VVTi, which you do want if you're planning to buy it. The GZ was the top of the range import with leather and an aero top removable roof, but it came in automatic. Non-turbo models had 225 base horsepower, 5-speed manual or 4-speed auto, called the SZ or the SCR, which had a 6-speed. And then the JDM and the US and UK versions did have some differences. How do you modify one really quick? Easy enough. I have switched my wheel sizes because I've seen a couple of these now that are 19s. 19 by 9.5 plus 22 and 19 by 10.5 plus 22 look awesome. 235/35 fronts for your tires, 275/30 for your rears. I think wheels like the Enkei NT03M look super good. The CE28N, the CR Kiwami, and my personal favorite are Workmeister S1 3-piece wheels on this car. I think are perfect. It's like Watanabe's on Datsuns. It's just perfect. Tires, go big or go home. Do not cheap out on tires. A lot of that is why I'll say if you're gonna throw horsepower at this thing, you need to make sure you've got good grip. So spend money here. BC Racing DS Series coilovers, probably one of the best bang for bucks you can get on the platform. Otherwise, you can jump into Fortunato 510s. If you're looking to modify your engine, we're gonna give you a couple things, but honestly, there are massive amounts of forums that talk about this. A lot of people will go with upgraded like 1000cc Denso injectors, Aeromotive fuel pressure regulator, usually upgraded fuel lines because they'll want to run E85, which you can do. They'll go into an external ECU, something like a Link or an Haltech. HKS Type R oil cooler kit that you can get on martiniworks.com, front mount intercooler, tile 50mm blow off valve, and of course catch can, all good stuff to make sure that you're keeping your oil and your cooling cool. All right, from there, clutch, most people run Exity, I'm gonna say that wrong. Exhaust 3.5 inch, pretty much anything. Get a downpipe and let it breathe. And as long as you keep it cool, and as long as you keep it fed with oil, you cannot blow up a 2JZ. It is literally a Miata engine on steroids. It is perfect. The A80 Toyota Supra is the car that you think you deserve in a relationship, and then you realize you can't afford it because in the mental state that you are, you're just not mature enough to handle that kind of partner in your life, okay? The A80 is the 10 out of 10 significant other. And if you want that, you're gonna need to work really hard and or have a lot of money. We give the Toyota Supra A80 a 9 out of 10. It'd be a 10 out of 10 if they weren't 6 figures these days, but nowadays that's all we can complain about because every time I go and look at the news, it scares me. But you guys let me know what car we should talk about next. Thank you so much for listening. All this information, practically useless. I didn't have a chance to give you a food tip, and for that, I sincerely apologize. I'm Alex, Alex.Martini with 2 underscores on Instagram. Go mod your car with your friends over at martiniworks.com, and if you need help, use the chat bot over on the website. We'd love to help you out, and we hope you have a fantastic day. See you later.